Okay, this is my first attempt at a video question. Bear with me. And I hope this serves as an example of one way of submitting a question for our critical questions discussions that we'll be having every Thursday and Friday. You can, of course, also write a critical question out, and this might be about a page long. And so for the video, we're probably talking, 3 or 4 minutes. Okay, so you watched the documentary Comic Book Superheroes Unmasked, and as many of you pointed out in our responses already, that the main point of the documentary is to look at how comic books, and particularly the superhero genre, have always dealt from the very beginning with politics, with world issues, and are not simply telling stories to children to entertain them. That they're not just escapist fantasy, that they are in many ways dealing with the world and inserting themselves very consciously into the politics of the day. So a question for today that you might take a look at is think back to when you were younger and consider when was the first time you really recognized that a piece of pop culture was making a very deliberate argument about politics or culture or the world and how you should look at a particular issue. So not so much, a lesson learned, like a life lesson for children, but rather a time when you remembered a TV show or a movie or a song or a comic book was not simply trying to tell you a story to entertain you, but was actually trying to make a point about the world and politics or international relations or anything like that. Also consider in what ways is this beneficial or a positive thing, in what ways is it a possibly negative, dangerous thing as well. So in the video that you watched, the most obvious example of comic books inserting themselves into politics was World War II. You actually had front cover, I think it was of Captain America, punching Hitler in the face. And this is before the U.S. is involved in World War II. And so, the comic book artists there were clearly making an argument. We should get in the war. I mean, what more serious argument could be being made? Of course, kids reading that, Hitler was an easy supervillain. And so children could just be reading that as entertainment. Here is a bad guy, and Captain America is saving the day and punching this guy in the face. But clearly, there's something more there. The artists were trying to get the U.S. involved in World War II, fighting against Hitler. Michael Chabon, who was one of the people interviewed in this documentary, he wrote a novel called The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier Clay, which is a fictionalized account of much of what that documentary is showing, of the early development of comic books. And he actually has a character who creates a comic book superhero who punches Hitler in the face. He's a young Jewish man who has escaped the Holocaust, and his family did not escape. And so he's very much involved and very much concerned, very much interested in using the power that he has and the platform that he has to get the U.S. involved in this war. He starts having questions about this, though, and realizes that the violent fantasies that he's creating for himself and for his audience, while political and on the right side of things, I think is pretty easily arguable, that he is creating violent fantasies and in many ways simply creating an argument for violent solutions and easy solutions to problems, and that while politically he's on the right side of things, against Hitler, how much is the interpretation of his work simply looking at violent solutions to complex world problems? And so that's an example of kind of struggling with the propaganda that we find in pop culture. You know, what good effects can it have? What dangerous effects can it have? So think about that in your own life and respond to that. This is something that we're going to be dealing with throughout the semester, even though many of the works that we're reading aren't dealing with superheroes. Several of them are very directly or indirectly. And so we begin with Watchmen, and often that's looked at as the first major critique of the comic book superhero. It places superheroes in a very real world and makes them very real, dangerous, political people. And so Watchmen's an obvious example. We're going to end with Batman, Frank Miller's version of Batman. And many people see Batman in particular as this dangerous superhero in terms of kind of a fascist, violent fantasy type of superhero, as looking to this very wealthy individual to solve all our problems because the police aren't going to fix it or the government's not going to fix it, creating this vigilante that is fulfilling our need to see people punished. That's also going to be a part in Incognito, pointing out the dangers. If we look at history, U.S. history in particular, who are the first masked vigilantes, which that's what superheroes are. The first mass superheroes in the U.S. are the Klan, and they were very much portrayed that way, and so Incognito is going to play with that a little bit. So once again, think about what was the first time that you remember a piece of pop culture, comic books if you have that memory, other forms of pop culture if you don't. What was the first time that you realized that they were making very real political arguments and trying to sway you in a particular way? And what are the dangers of this, and what are the positive effects of